Hello, my name is Mark Davis. I'm 42 years old, and I never dreamed my life could flip upside down in a single instant. But that's exactly what happened to me on what started off as a typical Sunday, a day that would transform everything I believed about faith, God, and what it really means to give. I grew up in a traditional family. We went to church every Sunday, rain or shine, and always stayed for fellowship afterward. As I got older, I kept up that routine. I sat in the same pew each week, right in the middle of the sanctuary. From there, I could soak in every note of the choir's singing. Their voices sometimes moved me to tears, as if a piece of heaven were reaching down into our ordinary world. On one particular Sunday morning, the sermon was about tithing, something I'd heard hundreds of times before. The pastor quoted Malachi 3:10, just as he usually did, urging everyone to bring their 10% to God. Each time I heard that verse, I felt two things: guilt, because I was afraid I wasn't doing enough, and determination, because I wanted to prove I was faithful. Over the years, I had prided myself on giving that exact 10%, even when money was tight. I honestly believed that by fulfilling this duty, I was securing God's blessings for myself. But if I'm being truly honest, my faith was shallow. I went to church, helped in the community, and tried to be kind. Still, deep down, I treated God more like a distant figure who kept a ledger of my good deeds, especially my tithing. I thought those donations would lock in my place in heaven. I see now that my sense of pride in this perfect giving blinded me to what God really wanted from me, my heart. Then came the day that shook me to the core, turning all my assumptions about life and faith upside down. It was a normal afternoon after church. I was driving home from running errands when a truck sped through a red light and slammed into my car. The tires screeched. Metal crunched, and then darkness swallowed me whole. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in my car. I found myself in a vast expanse of bright, comforting light. I felt held and surrounded by warmth, but at the same time, I felt as if every hidden part of me was exposed. That's when I saw him, Jesus. I knew exactly who he was, even before my mind could form the thought. His presence radiated both love and authority in a way I'd never experienced. I dropped to my knees, trembling. I wanted to speak, to justify myself or apologize, but words wouldn't come out. Jesus looked at me with eyes that seemed to penetrate every corner of my soul. There was indescribable love in that gaze, yet I felt deeply aware of my own shortcomings. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. His voice was gentle yet firm, like a loving father and a mighty king all at once. I couldn't manage an answer. My mind spun, trying to grasp what was happening. "Let me show you," he said. Suddenly, my entire life replayed before me like a movie. Every moment, every decision, every secret motive was laid out in full color. I saw the good things I'd done, helping a friend, giving to charity, singing in the choir, but I also saw the times I ignored people who needed help because it was inconvenient or too time-consuming. I saw the pride that fueled my acts of service and giving. All those years of being proud of my perfect tithe were now exposed for what they really were. Hollow gestures fueled by obligation, need to feel righteous. My illusions shattered. Everything I once believed about my own goodness felt flimsy and shallow. Jesus spoke again, his voice resonating with truth and compassion. "You've misunderstood. Tithing isn't about money. It's about trust, about your heart." Those words pierced through me. Tears flooded my eyes as I realized how far I'd missed the mark. I'd thought that giving a strict 10% would keep me in God's good graces. Now I saw it was never about the money. It was about surrendering my whole self to him. "You've been given much," he continued, "but you've held yourself back. Now I will show you what you've missed." Before I could respond, everything shifted. In an instant, I was transported to a place more beautiful than anything I've ever seen on Earth. Colors shimmered and sparkled in ways that defy description. The air felt alive with a kind of music that made me want to fall to my knees in worship. I saw people there, radiant, joyful, in perfect unity with one another. No sorrow, no pain, no fear. Just an overwhelming sense of love and belonging. Every fiber of my being yearned to remain there forever. I felt Jesus beside me again. His expression was warm and tender. "This is what I desire for all my children," he said. "But not everyone understands how to truly live for me. Many cling to outward rituals and rules, but their hearts are far away." I felt his words wash over me, exposing how often I'd relied on religious practices, especially tithing, to prove my devotion. But the real question had always been, do I love and trust God with my entire being? Before I could dwell on that, the vision changed again. Suddenly, I was plunged into a place of deep darkness. The contrast from the beauty of before was staggering. I heard anguished cries and felt a crushing atmosphere of despair. Shadows of tormented souls shifted in the distance, weighed down by remorse. There was no hope in that realm, only suffocating emptiness. "This is the result of living apart from me," Jesus said, sorrow heavy in his voice. "When people hold back their hearts and live only for themselves, this is what follows." I desperately wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Jesus held my gaze, not to punish me, but to confront me with the reality of choices, both mine and those of countless others. "You cannot serve two masters," he said. "You must choose." In that moment, I felt the weight of every selfish choice I had ever made. My craving for control, my pride, my checklist approach to religion, all of it had kept me from genuinely surrendering to God. I realized how blind I'd been to the bigger picture of what it means to have real faith. "But there is hope," Jesus said, his voice breaking through the darkness like a beam of light. "You're being given another chance." In the blink of an eye, I was back in that realm of bright light, with him standing before me. He held out his hand. "I offer you a choice," he said. "Return to your life and truly live for me, or continue as you were and miss out on the fullness I have for you." A wave of overwhelming humility hit me. I knew I didn't deserve any more chances, but his love and mercy were undeniable. Tears streaming down my cheeks, I whispered, "Lord, I choose you. Teach me to live for you, not myself." Jesus smiled, a look of deep compassion lighting up his face. "Go and tell others what you've seen," he said. "Let them know I want their hearts, not empty rituals. Remind them that true worship flows from a life surrendered in love." With that, the light flared, and I felt myself pulled back into my body. I woke up in a hospital bed, bruised and battered, but alive. Doctors called it a miracle that I survived at all. But I knew the real miracle had taken place in my soul. From that day forward, my life changed in ways I never expected. I struggled at first with how to share my story. It seemed too extraordinary, too impossible. But I knew Jesus had given me a mission: to spread the message that we are called to trust God with our entire lives, not just a fraction of our paycheck. In the months and years after my encounter, I dug deeper into the Bible to learn more about God's heart for giving. Over and over, I found passages that reminded me that God wants us to give freely and cheerfully, not under compulsion or fear. Tithing was just the tip of the iceberg, an invitation to trust God with everything, not a transaction to buy his favor. Slowly, I started giving differently. Instead of focusing on hitting 10% exactly, I began looking for genuine opportunities to help people in need. Sometimes, I gave more than 10%. Other times, I gave less in money but more in time or resources. The key was letting my giving flow from love and a desire to honor God, not from a sense of duty or pride. Some people in my church had a hard time with this concept. A few voiced concerns that I was ignoring the biblical standard, but I noticed that whenever I explained how God had shown me the heart behind giving, some of those same people eventually felt a stirring within themselves. It wasn't about discarding the idea of tithing, it was about understanding its true purpose. Surrender, gratitude, and faith. As I opened up about my near-death experience, I saw hearts transformed. People who had been giving out of fear or obligation realized that God loved them regardless of the size of their donation. Their giving became joyful, a reflection of a deeper relationship with God. They discovered that when they gave with open hands, they also opened their hearts to God's love. And in that openness, they found real peace. I was invited to speak at a special event in our church about generosity. Standing at the podium, I felt the same nervousness I had felt kneeling before Jesus in that realm of light. I told my story from beginning to end, my pride in tithing, the accident, and the powerful encounter with Christ. I explained how he showed me that giving is all about the heart, not the amount. True generosity grows from love and trust, not a checklist. When I finished, there was a hush in the sanctuary. Then, people began to rise from their seats and clap. Some approached me afterward in tears, saying they finally felt free from the pressure to measure up in their giving. They'd always worried that if they didn't hit 10%, God would be disappointed in them. My testimony helped them see that God wanted their hearts more than their money. Looking back, I can hardly recognize the person I was before the accident. I used to see tithing as a kind of spiritual insurance policy. Pay my dues, and God would reward me. Now I understand that what God truly wants is a relationship with us that transforms every corner of our lives. When that happens, giving becomes a natural overflow of a grateful heart, not a grudging obligation. Yes, some people still question whether my near-death experience was real. Maybe they think it was a dream or the result of trauma. But I know what I experienced. The love, the authority, the complete transparency of Jesus, it was beyond anything I could have imagined on my own. It humbled me to the core and set me on a new path. If there's one point I want to drive home, it's this. Tithing, or any giving, is not a financial formula for blessings. It's a reflection of where your heart stands with God. If you're giving to earn points or avoid curses, you've missed the beauty of God's grace. But when you give out of love and trust, your entire starts to change. You see that everything belongs to God anyway, and in giving back, even if it's money, time, compassion, or resources, you're simply participating in His goodness. Today, I'm freer than I've ever been. I no longer worry that I'll fall short of some spiritual quota. I give how and when God leads me, whether that's helping a neighbor with a broken-down car, mentoring a teenager who needs guidance, or supporting a mission that truly touches my heart. And in return, I've found blessings that go way beyond material things. Peace, joy, and a closer bond with God Himself. It took a near-fatal crash and a breathtaking encounter with Jesus to wake me up. But I hope that by sharing my story, others won't wait for such extreme circumstances. We can choose right now to open our hearts fully to God, trusting Him with our lives, our future, and yes, our money. When we do, giving becomes part of a living relationship, a real partnership with the divine. That, I believe, is the true spirit behind every gift we offer. I'm no longer the same person who sat in that middle pew every Sunday, feeling smug about my exact 10%. I've seen a glimpse of heaven, felt the darkness of separation, and experienced the overwhelming love of Jesus firsthand. If there's anything I can leave you with, it's that this love calls us to give every part of ourselves. Not because we have to, but because we get to. And that, my friend, is the heart of real worship. When we set aside our pride and let love lead, we find freedom. We discover that tithing, or any giving, was never about impressing God or fulfilling a rule. It's always been about living in the fullness of His grace, pouring out what we have because our hearts are already overflowing with His love. That is the greatest gift of all, and it can set you free just as it has set me free.